This is the EWN Podcast Network.
Ever wondered how you could turn your side hustle into a full-time gig and spend more time together?
Hi, I'm Vikki, a #1 best-selling author.
And I'm John, a retired Los Angeles police officer. Welcome to Dig the Well, where we help couples navigate the world of business.
We've been married for 35 years, and because we built a successful side business, John retired 9 years earlier than he originally planned from the Los Angeles Police Department after 25 years on the job. Now we spend more time together, and we want to help couples like you do the same.
Join us as we help you overcome common obstacles, and we show you how to make extra income without sacrificing family time.
Ready to dig deep and build your well? Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Dig the Well. We are back. We're super thrilled, over the top, excited, happy to have our son on this episode of Dig the Well.
Yeah, for sure.
Super. And we're going to tell you, before we jump into some questions for John, we're going to tell you a little bit about him and his backstory. So John is an Olympic weightlifter, and we're going to get into that. Like, what is Olympic weightlifting compared to other types of weightlifting? And did he always do that? And where did he go to school and those types of things? I'll just tell you, he went to UCLA, and he and our daughter Misa both, they were there at the same time. And for his parents, being worried about your kids in college, that was really cool to know they're both there together. John and Misa, I talked about this on a previous episode, went to a summer camp when they were little at La Sierra Academy. Remember that, John? For entrepreneurs. It was a summer camp for kids having their own business, and it taught them a bunch of cool stuff for a week. And so I know growing up with us, and we're going to get into that too, that I'm sure there was always been kind of an eye for owning his own business, and that's what he does alongside the Olympic weightlifting. So without further ado, welcome, John. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Yeah, Saif, I think, was the name of the summer camp.
Thanks.
That's it. We couldn't remember.
I don't remember what it stands
name
for, but Saif, S-I-F-E. Yeah,
that's right.
Saif Summer Slam, I think is what they called it. But
thank you.
Yeah.
I could not remember for the life of me.
It was fun.
Yeah,
we had to invest in fake stock market and stuff like that with actual companies, though. So you get to invest in, I think I invested in Boeing when I was 8.
Yeah.
Obviously, they give you fake money, but probably not.
I was going to ask you how old. I thought it was second, 3rd, 4th grade, somewhere in there.
I think so. So I would have been between 7 and I think it was through 3rd grade, because then we went to then we switched schools and we went to Lincoln. Yeah. And so I think it was maybe 1st through 3rd grade or something.
I know.
So 3rd grade would have been 8.
I think that's awesome, right? Didn't it open your eyes?
Fun too.
Yeah.
You think public schools don't probably have that option available to the kids?
Yeah. I've never heard of it. Yeah. So Dad's going to take it away with the first question.
Okay, so we're just going to ask you some questions to find out a little bit more about you, and then we'll talk some more at the end. But our first question for you, John, is what was it like growing up in a family where both of your parents were entrepreneurs?
I think it was really nice. I think for one thing, Mom and you guys were both, someone was home most of the time, if not all the time. So it was nice having your parents around more than I think a lot of other kids did. And then I remember specifically, it's funny, I probably didn't like it at the time, but looking back on it now, it was great. But I think we did our chores a different way than most of my friends. So we would do, you guys would have us do our chores, and that was how we got paid. That's how we got money. And then I remember going to school and hearing from my friends about an allowance, and I was like, "What's an allowance?" Like, what is that? We don't have that. And they're like, "Oh, like you don't get money from your parents?" And I was like, "Yeah, we do, but like we do our chores, and then we get paid depending on like the chores that we do." And I was like, "So what's an allowance?" And they're like, "Oh, we just get money from our parents each week." And I was like, "What do you mean?" So I think I'm sure they had chores, but they got money regardless of whether they did their chores or not. And I think our way taught us like a couple of different things. One was that, like, to value money so that it doesn't just come from not doing anything or nothing. But also that it gave value to our chores. So it was like the other way around too. So that you weren't just doing chores just because your parents said so. You were doing chores, well, because it like helps them get everything done around the house, but also because that's how you can get some money. And then I remember you also had the little punch card, like the little time card machine out in the garage. So we would do, I remember, I could picture, I think you guys might still have it actually, that little, it's like a green or teal machine.
We do. We have it.
Yeah. But that was how we got extra money aside from the chores. We would do work, like for your business. I remember like bagging things as like little like party favors for people. And so we would go out there, me and I would walk out there. We had our little papers. We'd walk out there. We'd punch in when we started our shift, or however much we were doing that day. Even if it was for like 15 minutes, we'd like punch in. Then we'd go back inside and we'd do whatever it is, whatever task you had for us. And then we'd go back out, punch back out. I think you paid us like $4 an hour, which was like a fortune to us. But yeah, so I think
that was a lot of money
really
back
good.
then.
It taught us a lot of good things. Yeah, it was. Yeah, especially if you're just putting, you're sitting in front of the TV, just putting things in little bags and stuff. So
yeah. I'm glad you brought all that up. Sorry to interject here. I know it was Dad's question, but we talked about that, about it being earned money. Yeah, we're like, remember, we chose not to do the allowance. We wanted it to be earned money.
Because allowance is a lot like welfare.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, you're getting paid for nothing.
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
And that's not what we wanted to instill in you guys. We wanted you guys to, like you said, put some value to it.
And that's a cool perspective. I hadn't ever thought about that. It gives value to the chore that's being done as well. Like I hadn't even thought about that. That's super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, it feels like you're just doing something. You're just doing work for nothing, which is no fun. So
exactly.
At least it gave us something to look forward to.
Something to do.
So that old punch card machine, that punch machine, whatever you call that thing, that's
time clock, I think.
Time clock.
What it's called. Yeah.
Okay.
That came from one of our first businesses that we started that we talked about in another podcast.
Yeah.
And for some of our employees were hourly employees. So they had little cards and they actually had to punch in and punch out and whatnot.
What's funny is that was in the 80s, and that time clock, it must be from the 60s. Like they didn't change. They all look the same.
It looks like it would be from the 60s.
I imagine if you go and look online and look for like little time clocks, they're probably the same damn thing. Nothing has changed on them whatsoever.
If they even have. Well, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's a cool, and we just, everybody listening, we have not rehearsed any of this. We had no idea what John's answers would be. This is really fun. That's why I had a big smile on my face the whole time when he was answering. It's so cool.
Yeah.
All right. So John, how has watching us build our business influenced your mindset about work and life?
That's
kind of a deep
I'm sure
question.
there's a lot to it that I probably don't, that you probably don't notice, like, yourself, because it's so like ingrained. But it's interesting because I never planned on initially. I mean, I'm sure you guys remember, I didn't plan on being an entrepreneur at any point. I was planning on being a police officer.
Yes.
And so I think, although I do think that sort of the entrepreneur, like work-life balance ended up being really nice, because I knew, so growing up, I'd always planned on being a police officer. I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. But then I got into college and I started powerlifting with my roommates. And then that led me into weightlifting eventually. We can talk about that a little bit more later. But once I got into weightlifting, I knew I wanted to be competitive at it, that I knew I wouldn't be able to really do both, because just seeing Dad working when he was a police officer, I knew that like if I wanted to really do what I wanted to do with it, which was like actually catch like real criminals, not just like somebody who's jaywalking or something, but actual criminals, that it would be night shift. And so, and then Dad worked 12-hour shifts at least. So you're looking at least 12-hour night shifts. A lot of times more than that because of like late arrests and stuff. I remember he'd come home really late in the morning a lot of times. And so I knew I couldn't really do both, like compete in weightlifting at a high level, because throughout weightlifting, I've kind of had like some ups and downs as far as time investment, but so for like about a year straight, the most time I've been putting in was at least 8 hours, Monday through Thursday. And then usually a day off on Friday, or if we had a big competition coming up, we would come in for a couple hours on Friday also. And then it would be another 3 hours on Saturday. So it was like a full-time job for the most part. And because we'd come in for a morning training session, we would train for about 3 hours. We didn't really have time between the morning session and the afternoon session to go home and come back. So we'd stay at the gym, try to like eat and rest and recover there for another like hour or two, and then come back for another 2 to 3 hour training session. So I knew I couldn't really do that and do police work. And so I ended up sort of looking for something different, which led me to what I do now, which is voiceover work. But I think seeing sort of like one side, which was like when Dad was a police officer, and then later, and seeing sort of like the entrepreneur side, which is sort of a more balanced work-life schedule, that I wanted the more balanced work-life schedule. And so I ended up not, making the decision not to go into police work and to pursue weightlifting, and then to start looking for something, some work elsewhere. And so that's at least part of how I got into both, into weightlifting and like audiobooks and voiceover in general.
Yeah, you're finding different ways to make money, right? That would fit the weightlifting schedule. Yeah, totally.
Your passion was the weightlifting.
Yeah.
It isn't working. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you made it all work out.
Yeah.
There's very little money in weightlifting in the US.
Yeah.
And so even though it's an Olympic sport, and and you sort of need to put in like full-time-ish hours on it. The stipend system, there is a stipend system in the US, but it's not, it's not great. It's not a professional sport. It's not like, football or basketball or something where there's millions of dollars going into it. And the athletes are seeing a lot of money, or at least at the top end, the athletes are seeing a lot of money.
Which is a shame. It really is. Because
it'd be nice if there was, but I also understand that the weightlifting doesn't draw huge crowds in the US. There are other countries where it's very popular. But in the U.S., it's a pretty small sport in relation to the major ones like football, and like I said, like football and basketball, baseball, hockey. Yeah.
Right. Totally get it. And by the way, all those medals are yours from all over the world. Yeah.
In the background
so
there.
Cool.
I have the rest of them in a bag somewhere, actually. But there's one of my singlets.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That you get for making international teams. They give you a singlet to compete in, and it's got it's got USA on the front, has your name on the back, and American flag on it.
So cool, cool. Yeah, love it. Love hearing all that.
Next question here is: what are the most valuable lessons you've learned from us about balancing family, personal goals, and business?
I think that does kind of tie into at least a little bit the last question, but I remember that you guys were at pretty much all of our major events, but like in particular, I mostly remember sporting events, and still are, because you guys were just with me in Doha, in Qatar, which is not many people can say that their parents flew all the way around to basically the other side of the globe to watch them compete for a couple hours.
We would never miss.
And then go to Dubai after. But it was really cool. And it has been really cool. It's been very important, I think, for Misa and I both growing up. And so, Yeah, so I remember that not only were you guys at all the sporting events, you guys were involved in all the sporting events for the most part also. Like dad coached me in football growing up, and then you guys were both in for high school involved in like the all of the what is it
Booster
like the
clubs.
booster club
Yeah.
and yeah, it was a booster club and there was something else.
Yeah.
But anyways, and then mom was always picking us up from school, like ever since we were very little. I'm sure you were relieved when me and I could finally drive. But
I was,
I
but
remember because you'd be.
yeah.
Oh yeah, what's that?
I was just gonna say I was, but my favorite time of you guys growing up would have to be that car ride home from school every day.
Okay. Yeah, when we're
I
telling
tell
you about
other
everything.
moms, I tell other moms, if there's a way you can swing it and pick your kids up from school, that's when you guys told me everything about your day. And then poor dad,
that's so fun. Yeah.
you'd get home and then I'm like, tell dad. And dad would get home from work eventually after all the late arrests. Tell dad about your day. We're good, because we
already told you, so we're tired.
So sorry. But I had to throw that in. That I'm so glad you remember that because it was so special to me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, because like when we'd come out, you'd always be there for the most part, waiting either in the pickup line, a little turnaround pickup line, or on like a side street or something, depending on what school we were at and what their pickup lines were like. But so I remember like a lot of my friends would either take the bus home or they'd be waiting for a while for their parents to get there if their parents were coming to pick them up. But you guys, you were always like waiting for us before we even got out of class, which was always really nice.
Yeah.
But so that was always great. I also remember a time when you had to leave to go to a business conference for one of my birthdays. And at the time I was really upset. I don't know. Do you know how old I was?
I do. You were 12 because it was Party Light.
12.
It was
Okay.
2003. Yeah. I just started and it was your birthday that weekend.
Yeah.
So we celebrated, but that you were not happy about that still. We celebrated a week early and you're like, but that doesn't matter. Because we always did.
It doesn't count.
We always did special birthdays together. So, but yeah.
Well, yeah. Like I think though that it was, I think it was like a good, in the end, it was a good lesson. And also it really goes to show how much you were like, it was so rare. What I mean is like, it was sort of like the exception to the rule kind of thing, the exception to the rule that proves the rule kind of a deal, where it was like, you guys were there for all the birthdays and all of the major events, except for like this one where mom wasn't there. And it was like, oh, like because like it was so rare that like it stands out, and it's I don't really remember it because you weren't there. I remember it more because it was like the one time. So it was just like so nice that like, because a lot of parents do have both parents working 9-to-5 jobs, and both parents, if your child's birthday falls on a weekday, which is likely that year, then you're just kind of like, well, like we'll celebrate this weekend, and that's just the norm. Whereas for us, that was completely the exception. It was very abnormal for us for that to happen.
Yeah. Like the exception to the rule for a lot of those families
kind of see like
is
that,
when they can actually celebrate on the actual birthday.
If it's completely unavoidable,
exactly. And I'm so grateful for that. Dad go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that if it's something that's completely unavoidable that you really feel is going to benefit, your family and your business in the long run, that occasionally you'll have to do things like that, like small sacrifices and things. And so I think it's like a good lesson for kids to learn too. That that like once in a while, like it's super rare, and I could see that you'd done that there was no way you could avoid it too, and it wasn't that you didn't want to be there.
Right.
And so I think it's like a good, it's also a good lesson. So
yeah. Totally. And like you said, most of the time I was there. Yeah. It's all because I had a side business, basically. And that's what we call it now, right? A side gig or whatever you want to, there's all kinds of new names for it, but that brought money in. So I felt that I was still bringing value to the family and helping with the family budget because I still had the little side thing, the candles, but I could be there most of the time. Yeah, that's cool. Cool. So my question now, or was that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
When's I hear this one?
No. Yeah.
Sorry. as an Olympic weightlifter, we're getting back to the Olympic weightlifting, which we all love.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle setbacks and challenges in your sport? And how does that compare to the challenges of business?
I think you handle them in a similar way, a very similar way. But I think it's a little bit easier in weightlifting to sort of like identify why a setback occurred or why a challenge is there. So like for us in weightlifting, you'll go to a competition. We only have a certain number of competitions every year. But so you go to a competition and it'll either, so like, let's say if you're having a setback, it goes poorly. And you can you can identify why it went poorly a lot of times. Were we sort of like out of shape for this competition, or is there a weakness in technique that really limited how much we could lift on the platform? And so I think those things are a lot easier to identify in sports in general. I think in business, it's probably a lot more difficult to identify exactly where your shortcomings are. But once you do, I think you sort of, you go about taking care of those things the same way. So you kind of like, once you figure out what your weaknesses are, if you want to be successful, you have to really like attack your weaknesses and turn, a lot of times we like focus in weightlifting on turning like weaknesses into your strengths. Mm-hmm. So if you're really bad at, if you're not very strong, like if you have sort of like relatively weak legs, but your technique is good, then obviously you wouldn't want to just ignore the lack of like leg strength and just focus on technique more, because that's not your limiting factor to begin with. So we would go, okay, I'm going to do a lot of squats and a lot of heavy pulls and things like that, in addition to still working on technique. And, there's always more room for improvement, but you would attack that weakness and you would be like, okay, I'm never going to be, limited by leg strength again. So I'm just going to do a lot of squats. I'm going to get way stronger, and I'm going to come back in the next competition. And now I'll have, not just really good technique, but also really strong legs. And so I think it's similar in business or in anything really, but yeah, where you have to figure out, okay, well, am I really bad at following up with people? Okay, like I need to do something that's going to help me follow up with people consistently going forward and make that something that I'm really good at. So maybe that's, you get really organized, or you put things on your calendar, or you develop some sort of system where, after you've talked to somebody and you haven't heard from them for at least like 2 days or 3 days or something, then follow up with them every time, 3 days later or 2 days later, or whatever your system is. Yeah. But I think it's very similar.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, that's an important point you bring up, because I think most people, whether it's sport or business, it doesn't really matter. It's the same concept, like you said. And I think we all have strengths and weaknesses. And I think people focus on their strengths because their weaknesses they're weak in certain areas because they tend to ignore those areas. And then they focus on the areas that they're strong, and they continue to develop the areas that they have strength in. And it really doesn't help them at the end game, right? You really want to, like you said, develop your weaknesses so that they're no longer a weakness. And if you're good at it, you're going to make that one of your strengths. And I know that's such an important concept that I think a lot of people don't really grasp, because they're so focused on what they do well, because they want to focus on that because it makes them feel good. Mm-hmm. But you really do need to focus on where you're weak and really take a good, honest assessment of where you are, whether it's business or in a sport, where you're at and where those weaknesses are, and really work on strengthening that and developing that. That's a really important point that I think most people don't even think about.
Yeah, love that. I love that you identified the weakness. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember coaching when you were really little, coaching one of the teams, and that was a big deal, right? I remember some of the coaches were just really so focused on some of the star players. And let's keep working with those guys. And my thing was, hey, let's identify the players that really need help, that are kind of like, I don't want to say were an anchor to the team, but they were really kind of holding the team back, because when they were in, they were the weakest part of our team, and the other team was exploiting that. And let's work on those. Let's really focus on those guys. The guys who can play these positions and do really well, and they're good at it, they're good. We need to work on the guys that need some help and help build them up, so we don't have some of these big, huge weaknesses on our team. And I think that was kind of a,
definitely.
I don't think everyone understood that.
Yeah.
All right. So next question is, what role has discipline played in your athletic career, and how do you think it translates to entrepreneurship?
Discipline's a really good one. I remember there was a specific like definition, I think it was, in our weight room in high school for football. That was just, it was really simple, but it was like, discipline is what you do when no one is watching. That's always like, it's very simple and really straightforward and totally makes sense, but it's like really stuck with me. And so like, obviously that has like implications in sports, like it's really easy in weightlifting to, to like, oh, I'm tired from, this long training session. I'm really beat up and it's been, or even like a long training block. And so like a block would be a block of time, like on a calendar. So like 12 weeks or something is like a typical full training cycle. And so that would be broken up into like usually like 4-week blocks. Sorry. But so like some blocks in training are really, really difficult. And some of them are just sort of difficult. They're always difficult, but but some are more difficult than others. And so it's really easy to, to be like, oh, like I'm really tired today. And like this block's been really hard. Fatigue's really high. I don't want to do like all of my accessory work because we do, so we all like our main lifts are on the barbell because our competition lifts are both on a barbell. But we do a lot of accessory lifts, what we call accessory lifts, which are things like band work or it's like resistance bands, things with machines, like cable machines, so like lat pull downs and things like that, leg extensions, those kinds of like not barbell related things. And it's really easy to view them as like, oh, like almost like bonus work. Like it doesn't really matter. It's just like extra. So it's easy to go, oh, like, I've done all my, my main lifts out on the floor. I have some accessory work every day, and it's easy to go, well, this one in particular, I really don't like doing. So it's easy to like skip one or two of those. The problem is that like over time, skipping one or two and you start you don't really notice it right away, but you skip one or two and over time you're just kind of slowly tracking down. And then there's no like one point where you can go like, that's where things went wrong. If, you have a bad result at the meet, it's because like it was slowly trending down, but you just didn't, it was so slow you didn't notice it because you're just cutting out one or two exercises or one or two things. So I think it's really, really easy in weightlifting and in sports in general to do that. I think it's also really easy when you're working from home to do that because it's super easy to get distracted. So like, I don't know if we mentioned, but so behind me, the black part is my recording booth. So I'll sit in there a lot when I'm recording, and then I'll sit in there when I'm not recording also to do my editing. So I edit my own voiceover and everything. And so I'll sit in there and I'll edit. And it's really easy and editing is I think it's really boring. It takes a lot longer than recording. The recording is fun because it's like a performance. And so you can tweak different things here and there. Like, oh, what if I put an inflection here? Or what if I move that over here? And and emphasize this part of the sentence. And so like that can be fun. The editing, not so much, but it's really easy to get distracted with like, and so, for other people and for Allison and I also, we're having a baby in January.
Yay,
and so
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm wearing my grandma bracelet.
Oh, good. Yeah. Oh, that's cute. Yeah. Once we have the baby though, like it's going to be really easy to get distracted. Oh, like the baby's crying. We need to do something, and when I'm trying to sit down to edit or something, it'll be very easy to get distracted. It's already easy enough to get distracted. And so without like discipline sort of holding you to the task, to get your work done for the day, then, like you might get some of it done and then you might not get much done the next day. And then maybe you get more done the day after. But like, if you don't have a consistent like plan for yourself, then it's just very up and down. And so it's really, really easy to let it slip, I think, without being very like disciplined with your time.
Yeah, that is so good. And you know what it reminded me of when you were talking? And I know you've read the book, The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson.
Mm-hmm.
Totally reminded me when
Yeah.
you let just little things go. It's not going to make a difference tomorrow, right? But exactly what you're saying, you can't, and you maybe can't put your finger on it. That's brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. You know, that's a good point you're bringing up too about a discipline that it's so easy to be distracted. That's one of the things that we've learned in running a business from home is you have all these distractions. If you were working out of an office, out of a little cubicle, then why do you think they put a lot of their employees in a little tiny cubicle to keep the distractions away, right? Keep them focused on work. Of course, fantasy football kind of screwed that whole thing up. But for us too, working from home, we have to be really disciplined on saying, okay, for this block of time during the day, we're just working on business. We're not going to let these other distractions get in the way, because if we were in an office, we wouldn't have the distractions, nor could we allow that to like break up our day so much.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's really tough.
Definitely calendar control on a daily basis. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Time blocks. Yeah. Awesome. That was really great. Now, how do you stay motivated when you're working towards long-term goals? This is really good for weightlifting, because I know you have a lot of long-term goals throughout your career, both in sports and life. Yeah.
Yeah. Motivation is interesting. I don't really like the word motivation very much. Because I think it comes and goes, and it's really, it's like, it's always, it's like an emotion. It's there sometimes, and then it's not there other times. And if you're really relying on motivation to get all the things done that you need to get done, then you're going to be very inconsistent. And so I think I like dedication better. And yeah, so like, I think if you think of yourself as sort of having like a baseline level of, this is what I'm doing, your productivity. So I'm always doing this no matter what. Even on days where I don't feel motivated, it doesn't really matter, because I'm doing this, I'm here at least. And you're doing whatever you can do, whatever, you feel like your baseline, like a good baseline for you is. And then sometimes motivation is there. Maybe you feel like you had a breakthrough on something. So for weightlifting, like we'll work on things in our technique. It's a really technical sport. And so like little tiny, like minute changes in technique really affect how much weight you can lift. And so I think like when you have those little things that sort of like finally click into place, then you get some like a big burst of motivation. You're like, oh, I feel like I finally figured something out. And so then you're really motivated. And so that's great. And you should run with it, kind of a thing, when it's there, so like your baseline is here, and then randomly, maybe not randomly, but your baseline is here, and then you have some motivation because you've had some sort of epiphany in whatever it is that you're doing, and you should run with that as far as you can. But eventually it's always going to go back down. You can't sprint forever. And so, you run with it as far as you can with your motivation. And then when your motivation runs out, that's okay. Like, you don't have to be, it doesn't mean that something's wrong. It just means that you're going back to normal.
Right.
And so I don't know if I really think about, like trying to stay motivated with goals. Because I think I've got once I like pick my goals, I just like, I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. And so I just sort of like have those locked in place, and those are my goals. I don't really have to like motivate myself to try to reach them. I just know that I have to keep doing the work and doing as much as I can. And then, and when I do feel motivated, then it's just a boost. It's like an extra, like a bonus kind of a thing. Right. And then I focus on my smaller, like, cause the big goals are like big long-term goals. And then I focus on sort of like the smaller goals, on the way to that. And those smaller goals might change a little bit here and there, depending on how things have gone. So like for right now, for me, I'm waiting on wrist surgery. And so I don't know if you can see it. I've got a big, it's called a carpal boss. Yeah. So I went in, we had x-rays done. It's basically, a bone built like basically a calcification, like bone is building up on either side of that part of my joint. It's actually two different sides where my finger meets like the bone, like the more like circular bone that's in your palm. And anyway, so I'm waiting to have surgery on that next month. And so my goals have sort of changed in the short term, at least. The long-term goal stays the same, but the short-term goals have stayed the same, or the long-term goal has stayed the same. The short-term goals have changed a little bit. So I haven't really competed this year, and that's really unusual. I usually compete several times a year. And so my goal now is more to just to work on technique and to like, I want to get back to squatting. So like, like one of our sort of assistance lifts is the back squat. And so I want to get back to squatting, what I used, like I want to get back to where I was in the past, which was a little bit higher than I'm at now. So I want to at least match my old personal record. And then if I can top it, that would be great. And so that's sort of my short-term goal right now, but the long-term goal stays the same. And so like sometimes those change a little bit. So
that's awesome.
But
yeah. And you're named Squats, since you mentioned squats. If anyone wants to follow John on Instagram, it's John_squats, right?
Yeah. So people at the old gym used to call me jokingly as like a nickname, sort of like awesome. Like it was as if it was my last name, like John Squats.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I like what you said about motivation, and I agree 100%. That motivation is from within. It's not an external force that people can't motivate you. You can motivate yourself. I mean, if you're looking at external motivation, you're actually talking about somebody influencing you, and you can be influenced externally, but that motivation really does need to come from within. And it's funny because it reminded me of, and I've said this before. I know you guys have heard me say this. It reminds me I think it was back in the 70s, the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach, Chuck Noll, had a wide receiver come into his office and say, "Hey, coach, I need you to motivate me. Because I know I've got better in me. I need you to motivate me." And Coach Noel looked at him and said, "If I have to motivate you, I'll fire you." So in other words, figure it out yourself. And I think that's true, right?
Yeah. You've always said that. Yeah. For our team, our current team that we work with, anyone we coach.
We try
that's your philosophy. He doesn't say that, but that's kind of.
We try and influence them to be the best they can be. But truly, when it comes right down to it, they have to be motivated themselves.
Right. To me, it's kind of like an anomaly of balance too. People, I want balance in my life. You're never going to have balance. At least that's my opinion. You'll do your best, but you're never going to have total balance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't think you'll ever have balance if you're pushing yourself for anything.
Yeah.
Like,
nor should
sometimes, it gives, either way a little bit here and there, but
there's ebb and flow.
Okay, next question is, what's one piece of advice you would give to young people trying to balance their passions with financial stability?
That's a good one.
That's a good one. I think I would say not to be afraid to try new things, to try things that are sort of off the beaten path, because that's definitely what I feel like I've done. I don't think, some people do make it work having a normal 9-to-5 job. There are a lot of weightlifters that do that. Most are not. Most of the really competitive weightlifters have found something else though. So most competitive weightlifters do something weightlifting related, which I don't do, but most of them do. They'll they'll coach seminars, or they'll coach at a local gym, things like that, as a trainer, as a weightlifting specific trainer, those types of things. And so I think, being open to trying different things, it really helps. Like if everyone's like, okay, well, I have to go to high school, college, and then start my 9-to-5 job in whatever field I started off, studying in college. I think it's really difficult to pursue your passions that way. It's not to say you can't do it. I think it's just a little bit more difficult. And I think sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes you are passionate about something that is also sort of your primary source of income, which is great. But that's not always the case, or probably not most of the time is the case. So I would say to not be afraid to be open to trying, different things, different businesses, starting your own business, something like that. That's sort of not what we're taught in school. We're really taught to just, like get good grades, go to school, get good grades, go to college, get good grades, and sort of then try to transfer that into just, your average normal 9-to-5 job. And that's success. And you're like, but what about the things I like?
Exactly.
Good luck with that.
And most people don't seem to be happy. Honestly, most people that follow that, I feel like they have to have something else. Yeah. Anyway,
something that they're passionate about. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so true. Yeah. They don't teach it in school and they really should. Also, personal development isn't taught in schools. And I think it should be.
Yeah. That's another really good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. All right. This might be our last question.
Nope, we have 3 more. You're not off the hot seat yet.
We didn't have to ask every single one of them.
Oh, I like them though.
This has been fun. Yeah, I do love it. All right. We'll keep going. So how do you think the entrepreneurial mindset has helped you in your athletic journey? Little twist on some of the other questions.
I think they're very, very similar. The same. So an entrepreneurial mindset and like an athletic mindset are really, really similar. Because even though, so for sports, like your coach is there a lot of the time, but they're not actually there to make you do anything in particular. Obviously, like it differs from coach to coach, how like really like hands-on and micromanaging they are, but most coaches are there to help you get better at what you're doing, not to make you do it in the first place. And so I think it's very similar with entrepreneurship and owning your own business. There's not somebody that's there making you do the thing. You might have somebody that's there. Maybe you hire a coach that's going to help you get better at something that you're doing. But they're not going to be, checking in on you. Hey, did you do your follow-ups today? Or did you, for me, it's like, did you record some auditions today? Or did you get this many chapters done? Or anything like that. If you do hire a coach, they would be working with you to try to help you get better at doing that a particular skill. And so it's very similar to weightlifting. You don't, or just to sports in general, you don't have someone there like making sure you do everything. You have to do that yourself. That's on you. So I think they're really, really similar.
Yeah, because it does seem like it goes hand in hand. Yeah.
All right. Next one is, what's one challenge you faced that made you think of something we taught you, and how did it help? How did it help you overcome it? This better be a good one.
Oh, this is interesting.
Oh man, that's
probably something your dad taught you.
It's so hard. That's because it's like, I feel like the majority of the things that I know are things that you guys taught me, and so it's hard to like identify something specific, because it's like, like my response to any challenge, I'm sure at this point, is influenced largely by things that you guys have taught us. So it's really hard to identify something like one thing in particular.
Yeah. We were great parents.
I would say maybe the importance of like sticking things out, of finishing things that you start. Because I know at one point in high school, I was so over football, and it was, it felt like a job that wasn't being paid for. And I wanted to quit, and you guys really pushed me not to. And I think it was really, really good for me as a person in the long run to finish things out. And that was when I was like a sophomore or something. And then obviously I wound up going on and, continuing throughout high school, and was one of the captains my senior year. And, I'm obviously very glad that I did stick it out. And so I think similarly, weightlifting has had a lot of points where it would have been very easy to, just call it quits. I think early on, especially, I had really high expectations for myself. I wanted to do I had a lot of big goals, and I wanted to do them all right now. And, I think I was 23 still at the time when I first started weightlifting, and I was coming from powerlifting. So I knew I had a lot of the strength that sort of carried over. And so I was like, well, I don't understand why I'm not, I came into my first nationals. So I qualified for nationals at my first meet and then went and competed at my first nationals. And I was like, I remember specifically having a conversation with my coach at the time and telling him like, I want to win. I don't care what you have to put on the bar for me to win. Just put it on the bar, kind of a thing. And like, it's a good mindset to have, but I also, I think should have, maybe like tempered my expectations of myself a little bit. So it's good to have like ambition and like big goals and really want to go after things. But like, I think I was expecting myself to win more than really like aiming to win. It was like, if I won, it would have just been like, yeah, I expected that to happen. And if I didn't win, or when I didn't win, it was like, oh man, I really let myself down. Like my expectations, I didn't meet my expectations for myself. And so I think it would have been really easy. So I think, let's see, I came into nationals and I finished 11th at my first nationals. And then the following year, I think I finished, I don't remember what place I finished.
I thought you were sixth.
It might have been,
I don't know.
Maybe. I don't remember. I do remember that. So that was my first nationals was 2015 and I won nationals in 2018. And in the intervening couple of years, I remember I was like on the podium, but not ever winning. And so I think after like a few years of coming in like second and third, I was really frustrated because of those expectations I'd set for myself. And really, I think it would have been very easy to call it quits then because I was at the time thinking like, man, I could have just stuck with powerlifting. I would be competing, I'd be competing sort of like possibly at an international level by then anyways. And I was a little bit like, thought about waffling back and forth and like thought about maybe going back to powerlifting, and it would have been really easy to quit and go back. But I stuck it out and obviously I'm still weightlifting, but yeah, so I stuck it out. And then in 2018, I won nationals, and was the last 85 kilo national champion because the weight classes changed that following year or that year.
Yeah. So forever you'll be, say it again. You'll be
the last 85 kilo national champion for the United States.
That is amazing.
Because 85 kilos is our body weight. So we have weightlifting as a body weight, is like a sport that's categorized by body weights. And so, so mine was 85 and now I'm at 89, but so if awesome. If I had sort of like called it quits early on when I wasn't, I was having some success, like, but it wasn't the success I wanted, and it would have been very easy. I remember specifically being very frustrated at like coming in second again, or coming in third, or coming in second. And it was just like, after, several years of that, a feeling like I had kind of like stalled out at the time. And then, because I stuck it out though, I ended up winning in 2018.
And then Team USA.
After that, I was going to say, and then after that is in 2019 is when I first I was an alternate for the world's team in 2019, and then I competed at actually it was in 2018. It was actually later that year in 2018. I was an alternate for my first world's team in 2018, and then I competed in 2019 at the Pan American Championships, and then I was supposed to compete in 2020 for the Pan American Championships, but that got postponed a year. So we actually ended up competing in 2021, which was weird because we had two Pan American Championships that year. There was the 2020 Pan American Championships taking place in 2021, and then the 2021 Pan American Championship. But
and was that in the Dominican? Was that when we went to the? Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, it was in Dominican. Yeah. But so if I hadn't if I hadn't stuck things out, then I wouldn't have gotten to compete internationally, and I wouldn't have won nationals. And
amazing. Right. Yeah, that's so good.
And then when they hung the medal on your neck at the 2018 nationals, what did he say to you?
Oh,
do you remember that? Because you told me that he said that they can never take this away from you.
Yeah, he said you're a national champion now, and they can never take that away. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Like no one can ever, ever take that from you. I think is what he said.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Love that.
And I love how you talked about not quitting, because that is a slippery slope, right? You start quitting, especially when you're younger. You start quitting, and then it's so easy to quit. The easy path is just, if you run into some adversity, is just to quit. And that's by sticking it out, you see that it actually paid off for you. And I remember when you were done with football, and I remember your mom and I talked about it. And we said, it's ultimately it's your decision.
Yeah.
And I think we told you that if you really want to quit, you can quit, but you'll never get that taste out of your mouth. The kind of regret of quitting, because you'll look back and think, gosh, I wish I hadn't quit. I wish I just stayed with it, and just stuck it through. So we were so happy that you didn't quit.
Yeah, that was great.
And I know you had frustrations with other things. It wasn't your performance on the football side of it. And I agreed with you. I was so frustrated with the whole program. Yeah. But I didn't want you to quit. Yeah. Because it was just taking the easy way out.
Yeah.
Okay, last question.
The final question.
Okay.
Okay. If you could describe the most important trait an entrepreneur should have, and what would it be and why? Ooh, that is a meaty one.
Yeah. Okay. We talked about dedication a little bit earlier and how I like that better than motivation. So I would say belief, I think, which I know is one of your favorite words.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say belief because, if you don't believe in yourself or believe in what you're doing, then you're not going to get anywhere. And that dedication sort of goes hand in hand with belief anyways, because I was thinking maybe dedication, but, I think dedication is it's a given if you have belief. Sort of you're dedicating yourself to that belief in order to have the belief in the first place. So I think I would say belief. Because especially for us, for weightlifters, it takes a long time to see the positive changes in anything that you do. And so if you don't believe that, that you can do these things or that the program that you're a part of is going to get you where you want to go, it's very, very easy to become discouraged and, to hop from program to program or to, go from sport to sport. And you have to really you have to believe it for a long time where you're not seeing any results that are really backing up that belief, until eventually you do. But if you don't have that belief, then you never really reach that point. And so that also sort of goes into the not quitting thing. But
totally. It's all connected.
Yeah,
That's
for sure. Hey, so actually I do have one last question for you.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's basically, how did you get started in Olympic weightlifting? Because a lot of people think they don't even know what Olympic weightlifting is. They think it's a lot like powerlifting. And when I tell people, my son's a weightlifter, they're like, oh yeah, I go to the gym all the time too. I'm like, that's not it. How did you get started in that?
That's funny. That's what we hear a lot from a lot of people. Either they think you're just that's weight training when you go to the gym and you just, you lift some free weights here and there, or you do some machines. That's it's technically weight training. Weightlifting, it's all one word, is the name of our sport. That's the total name. We add in the Olympic part to sort of help with that misconception, because it is the sport of weightlifting, which is in the Olympics. And so to distinguish even more weightlifting from powerlifting and bodybuilding and weight training, we call it Olympic weightlifting a lot of times. But so I started off, so I grew up playing football. And so there was obviously a lot of weight training involved in football. But then when I went to college, I knew I wanted to do something different. And so I tried out, I played a season of lacrosse at UCLA, and that was, it was a lot of running and not a lot of hitting. So it was not my favorite thing. But at the same time, one of my roommates got us all into powerlifting. And so I would powerlift, and then I would go out to the field and go to lacrosse practice, and I'd be tripping over my feet, and just by myself in the open field because my legs were so tired from squats. And then I kind of reached a point where I was like, okay, I have to pick one or the other. I'm exhausted. I can't do both. And so I played out the season of lacrosse and then said, okay, thanks. It was fun. I think I'm going to go do powerlifting. And so I switched to powerlifting, focused on that. And that was really fun in college, with my friends, with my roommates. But once college ended and everyone sort of moved back home, then it was just me by myself powerlifting, and it was considerably less fun. I got a little bit bored. it is the same, generally speaking, the same movements every day. And so, not that weightlifting isn't, but there's a little bit more variety in weightlifting and a little bit more focus on, I would say, on the technical side. And so there's some challenges that way that are a little bit different from powerlifting. And so I ended up switching from powerlifting to weightlifting after a few years of powerlifting. And and really like fell in love with the sport. It's a love-hate relationship, but I think everything that's challenging is sort of that way.
Marriage.
And so, so I think, it's been good. It's been almost 10 years now, I think. So my first competition, my first actual weightlifting competition was in February of 2015. And so I started training for weightlifting. I think I started getting coaching at the end of 2014, maybe like October or something like that. So this would be 10 years since I started training, since I started getting coaching for weightlifting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so, I'm glad you asked that. That some of the stuff I didn't even know. Like I've learned more about you, John, on this on this podcast.
I guess we haven't really talked about it.
Yeah, we haven't. We haven't. This
now the whole myth's been debunked about weight training, weightlifting, powerlifting, right?
Or bodybuilding.
People
too.
will ask, or like Allison, my wife, will tell people, like, oh, what does your husband do? And like, she'll mention like, the voiceover stuff, but then she'll also talk about weightlifting, and they're like, oh, so he goes up there in like a Speedo, or like, when does he get his spray tan on? And she's like, no, not bodybuilding, not
bodybuilding. Body. And to the bodybuilders listening, nothing against you, but that's not what John
does.
Don Ramisa did that for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, this has been a total blast. We're so excited that you accepted the challenge of jumping on
and
podcast.
Fun.
And for those that want to follow John again in his weightlifting, he's John_squats on Instagram.
And you know what to do. If you like what you heard, definitely like it, give us a review, subscribe, and share with a friend if you think they would love to hear this episode. Maybe an athlete, maybe somebody that's looking to start a business that's younger, doesn't know. Send them this episode. All right. Bye for now.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on Dig the Well.
We hope you feel empowered and ready to take on new challenges.
Remember, if we can do it, so can you. Keep learning, keep believing, and going after your dreams.
And if you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who needs a little inspiration or maybe a nudge in the right direction.
Help us grow this community of go-getters. Together, we can achieve greatness and get back to family.
Thanks for listening, and let's keep digging the well.